Hello and welcome. Thanks everyone for joining us today for our webinar, How to Solve the Top 5 VMware Virtual Machine Issues Before They Happen. My name is David Davis and I'll be the primary host for the webinar today. Before we get started, I'd like to tell you a little bit about myself and my co-presenters today. My name, again, is David Davis. I'm a VMware vExpert, a VCP, a CCIE, and a video training author, primarily on the topic around virtualization for Pluralsight.com. I started my career back as a server network admin working in the data center, and it was later where I ran into virtualization, and we had an amazingly successful consolidation project, and I absolutely fell in love with virtualization and consolidated our data center and haven't stopped talking about virtualization ever since. I'm the co-owner of Actual Tech Media with Scott Lowe, who's also on the call today. And we create technical marketing content and demand generation for companies around virtualization, storage, and cloud computing. My blog is virtualizationsoftware.com, and you can find me on Twitter as David M. Davis. Also joining me today is Scott D Lowe. He's a vExpert and co-founder of Actual Tech Media. Scott's been in the IT field for over 20 years and spent 10 of those filling in as a CIO for various organizations. Scott's a micro-analyst for Wikibon and Information Week, and Scott has written thousands of articles and blog posts and regularly contributes to sites such as Tech Republic, Wikibon, and Virtualization Admin. Scott has a unique blend of skills around CIO and engineering, and Scott's a sought-after resource for marketing collateral and technology expertise. And then our special guest today is Mr. Dennis Zimmer of Opvizor. Dennis began working in Opvizor, working on the Opvizor platform back in 2010, and he was appointed CEO and director of the board. He's responsible for daily operations, technology, strategy, and alliances. And prior to starting in Opvizor, Dennis held the position of a virtualization specialist and systems engineer in the EMEA Central with the storage vendor Pillar Data. He has more than 17 years of experience in the IT industry, and he's spent most of his time recently completely devoted to problem solving and performance and capacity management solutions around virtualization. He's also a VCP, a VCAP, and a 5-time vExpert award holder. So we have 3 vExperts on the call today, and we've got a lot of really great problems and solutions to talk about. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. So the first question might be, why do we care so much about virtual machine issues? We thought, virtualization was easy, and once you virtualized, you just didn't have any more problems. Unfortunately, that's not always the case, as probably most of you know if you're on this webinar today. Virtual machine issues, there's potentially thousands of different sources of trouble in a complex, modern virtual infrastructure. And virtual machine issues are a major source of trouble, for companies of all sizes. Of course, you could also have, storage issues or network issues, guest operating system issues, or virtualization hypervisor issues or host server issues. But in particular, we honed in this webinar on virtual machine issues because based on what I've heard talking to virtualization admins at vMugs and what Dennis has learned talking to thousands of companies around the globe is that virtual machine issues are really the top problem that comes up, and in many cases, the easiest of the problems to solve. Virtual machine issues can cause, poor performance and, in the worst scenarios, unexpected downtime for the applications running inside those virtual machines, which might be some of our most critical, applications. And so you might be wondering, how is it that we came up with the top 5 virtual machine issues that we're about to talk about today, amongst the thousands of potential virtual machine issues. And at this point, I'd like to ask Dennis to join us. Dennis, I know you helped us select these top 5 virtual machine issues. So how is it that that you came up with this list of the top five.
Yes, yeah, thanks, David, and hi, everybody. Actually, we analyzed over the years several millions of virtual machines, and what we actually found out is everybody speaks about all these fancy and high complex issues you can run into, but in real life, you typically find these issues once in a lifetime or several times a year. Um, but surprisingly, some of the most easiest to solve issues and some of the pretty obvious issues are actually the issues we encounter most. So we sort of not going after the most fancy issues, but going after the most common issues that are existing in VMware environments. So therefore, we came up with the following five issues.
Yeah, great clarification. These aren't the most obscure or the most complex issues out there. These are the most common issues, and in many cases, as you said, these are also the easiest of the virtual machine issues to solve. So, without further delay, oh, wait, hold on. One more thing here. I want to quickly introduce you to our sponsor, which is Opvizor, the company that Dennis has formed. And it's through the Opvizor tool that we were able to identify and rank those top five most common virtual machine issues that we talked about. And so I want to give a brief background about Opvizor. We will be having a demo later in the webinar. Opvizor is a tool that, in my mind, is unique because there aren't that many software as a service virtualization management tools out there. Opvizor is a software as a service tool, so there's no hardware that you need to dedicate for virtualization management and monitoring when you use it. There's no guest operating system license to buy. There's no complex installation. It's just a small collector that you install, and then it starts sending anonymized data up to the Opvizor cloud for analysis that happens very, very rapidly. Opvizor is analyzing thousands of hosts and millions of virtual machines around the globe, and they are able to collect all that data and do what they call collective intelligence to um, find out what the most common problems are and what, in many cases, through feedback from the users, what the solutions are, and they also help you to make recommendations and remediate those solutions as well. It's unique also in that it's a community design. So, one admin can choose to give a recommendation to another admin to help the community. So I really like that about it. The community, design of the tool is very unique. They have over 730 rules in their cloud rule base, which is what they use to analyze and identify problems, across the virtual infrastructure. So it's very focused on identifying problems and then helping you to find the solutions to those problems. So I'm proud to be joined by Opvizor today. So with that, let's go ahead and kick off the list of the top five virtual machine issues, starting off with number one, which is that the virtual machine tools are either outdated or simply not installed on a virtual machine. And to a lot of new admins or junior admins, they in many cases don't even realize the importance of the virtual machine tools and all the benefits that they provide. So we'll be talking about that. We'll be talking about number two, which is the old virtual network devices. And you might not realize the impact that old virtual network devices have on the network performance of a virtual machine. Number three is virtual machine memory limits, which aren't usually a good thing, and we'll talk about that. Number four is virtual machine snapshot age and size, and we'll get into that. And then number five is virtual machine logging issues. So we've got a lot of great problems here to discuss and also provide you with the solutions for each. So with that, I'd like to hand it over to Mr. Scott D Lowe, who's going to tell us a little bit about the impact of having old virtual machine tools or simply having virtual machine tools not installed. Scott?
Thank you, David, and thank you, Dennis, and thank you all for joining us today. This is a problem that's been around for quite some time. Every time that VMware releases a new version of vSphere, there's often new VMware tools that come associated with that new version. In more recent versions of vSphere, VMware has made it possible to keep VMware tools updated, but this is not always enabled by users. So over time, you start seeing the message like the one you see on your screen. VMware tools is out of date. Every time you go to a particular VM, you see this pretty yellow banner telling you you have something that needs to be addressed. And it may not sound like that big a deal because it's just a yellow banner, not a red one. But when you really get down to what VMware Tools does, it starts to become apparent that VMware Tools is a pretty critical service to keep current. Now, when you look at, for example, memory management and drivers and all the good stuff that happens inside virtual machines, all of this is very dependent on working VMware tools. So, for example, when you install VM tools on a client, all of the drivers that are necessary for the advanced functionality of that virtual machine get installed along with VMware tools so that all of a sudden your Windows operating system can take advantage of some of the newer capabilities that may be found in that new version of vSphere. Likewise, there's additional drivers. For example, the balloon memory driver. This is one of the ways that vSphere works its magic on being able to borrow memory from guests to be able to use for more critical tasks and really perform much better overall management of RAM, which is one of the most scarce resources in people's clusters. And again, the guest operating system could run without virtual machines, but it's going to be slower and it's not going to be as efficient in the environment because it won't be able to do some of those advanced memory management techniques that I just talked about, and you're not going to get the storage I/O, the graphics performance, and some of the other networking benefits that come with the drivers that are installed by VMware tools. And again, we won't be able to have that reclamation of memory, which is so critical to be able to share among all the virtual machines as necessary. Really, when you think about a lot of the problems on the list, VMware tools solving that issue can really help with improving the overall performance of your environment. Now, it's not too hard to determine which machines have VMware tools out of date because as soon as you go to a virtual machine in vCenter, it's going to tell you that VMware tools is out of date. However, as your environment grows, this becomes a more complex problem to solve. You don't want to have to go through hundreds of virtual machines to determine which ones have tools that are out of date. This is where tools like Opvizor make it a breeze to detect these sorts of issues. So Opvizor has taken the approach that you don't want to have administrators wasting cycles going out and manually checking these virtual machines all the time to see if tools is updated. As such, it's a rule in the Opvizor tool set, and it basically just tells you right in an administrative dashboard exactly which virtual machines need to be addressed from a VMware tool standpoint.
And actually, Scott, you raised a great point regarding the old drivers. Because with the VMware tools, all the drivers for the virtual devices actually are installed. If you have an old version or even no VMware tools installed, you cannot even leverage any of the optimized driver from VMware. That means sometimes drastic performance decrease. That can even mean that you run your system with half of the performance that is possible or even less.
And that brings up density issues in the environment as well. If you're running half the performance, it's still going to use similar host resources. If you're using those optimized drivers, you can often increase the density of your virtual machine environment as well.
Yeah, great point, Scott. Improving consolidation ratios. You don't think about it with just a handful of virtual machines and outdated tools, but when you have hundreds and thousands of virtual machines with outdated tools or tools not installed, then certainly you're affecting your consolidation ratios. One of my pet peeves is when you download virtual appliances or even appliances from VMware and their tools are already outdated and need to be refreshed. Because I really like, besides all the performance issues, I know it's a minor thing, but just being able to perform a guest OS, shutdown or restart from within the vSphere console, of course, isn't possible without the VMware tools installed. So great points about the VMware tools, being out of date or not installed. And in fact, while I was doing some research on this topic, I was surprised at exactly how long it took me even to go in and generate a report about which virtual machines didn't have their tools installed or were outdated. It took quite a few clicks for me to locate and create that type of report. So, just creating that report manually through the web client, let's say, or even running a PowerCLI script manually to get that information, periodically is something, you don't want to have to do manually, and most likely you're just going to forget and not do, at all. And so again, as Scott mentioned, that's why it's important to have a tool like Opvizor continually monitoring the environment, for this type of problem. So let's move on to the second most common virtual machine issue here, and that is old virtual network devices. Dennis, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, actually, because it's a pretty, to me, a pretty surprising issue that actually is in the top 5, let's say, for these pretty common issues, because it has a huge impact on the performance of the virtual machine. So there are hardly any virtual machines that are not relying on network performance. And as soon as you have a network device that is, this is a VMX-Net 2 already in the screenshot, but there are a ton of old VLANs or AMD PCNet devices out there, and they are not so rare. So it's pretty easy for us to detect them, but it's surprisingly how often you detect it. And we had a situation, actually it's about 1.5 years ago, when it came to database performance issues, and a virtual firewall actually that was running on the system. And both were basically not having any VMware tools installed, and therefore they were running on the old PCNet 32 network card. That actually was basically a performance you cannot imagine. It's basically like deactivating your caching in a CPU on your BIOS. So really enormously bad performance. After installing the VMware tools, still the adapter type was just being moved to VMX-Net, a bit better, but still pretty non-optimized. So I would actually extend the current issue also with non-optimized, so not the best device for your virtual machine. So it took some steps actually to get really the best performance out of the application, because we needed to install the VMware tools, we needed to change the network adapter to the latest one, the VMX-Net 3, and then we actually had a performance that was multiples of the performance we had before, especially when you have systems with a lot of packets that are getting generated and sent and received, a firewall, sniffer, or a lot of monitoring tools, for example. If you run them virtually and you have old network devices installed, you basically waste a lot of performance, but more importantly, you have a pretty heavy, noisy neighbor. Because this device or this virtual machine is actually taking a lot of your CPU interrupts, making it hard for other virtual machines basically to get CPU time. So you really slow down your whole system, not just the virtual machine, also the host itself.
Yeah, and I think a lot of admins, they have the perspective of, well, if something's not broke, then, why change it? Why fix it? And so they're not going to go out and, proactively look for virtual machines with old network devices, because no one's complaining, right? And
Exactly.
performance, as the network utilization goes up on a particular application that's running in a virtual machine, over time, the performance gets worse because of this old network adapter type. But it happens perhaps slowly over time, and they just don't realize it, until finally one day it just completely stops working, and then they take action. But all that time, the end users were suffering, much poorer performance than they should have been getting out of that particular application.
And
David,
you can be easily misled. Oh, sorry, Scott, go ahead.
I also think it gets back to that question of density and economics around the virtual environment. Every time you have something running that's not optimized or efficient, you're basically leaving money on the table when it comes to operating the environment, increasing the total cost of ownership.
Yeah, that's a great point. Great point, Scott. And Dennis, what were you going to say?
You actually also have or several situations where you get misled. So having a couple of these virtual machines being really the noisy neighbor, and your productive database is running slow, or your mail system is running slow. So you're actually looking for a virtual machine that is not really the cause of the issue. So that is also something always to keep in mind. You're probably battling or you're on the wrong battlefield if you want to, and you're not looking for the right system just because this system is not telling you any bad behavior.
Oh, that's a good clarification. So, if someone complains about poor network performance for a particular application on a VM, it might not actually be even associated with that virtual machine. It's another VM with an old network device that's on the same virtual switch that's actually causing that problem. Very interesting, Dennis. So how does Opvizor help you to identify this? It scans all of virtual machines in the infrastructure and it looks for this particular scenario?
Exactly. So we are basically doing several things. So of course, we are looking for the configuration of all virtual machines. We are looking for especially the network devices that are extremely old, or basically existing when you don't have VMware tools installed. But we also check for application performance. So when you, for example, run an Oracle database, you can run an application optimizer, and it will tell you that your network device is not optimal for your application. And then, of course, when we detect bad performance of systems, we also raise an issue for that, and you can combine it. And that is the beauty of Opvizor, that you see it also across clusters, across vCenters, but also within a cluster, you directly see if a group of system has the same issue. So it's a lot easier to find the root cause.
So you identify the root cause, which I think a lot of virtualization monitoring tools out there don't do at all, or they do a very poor job of by doing just a massive alert storm of all sorts of potential issues that aren't even really the root cause.
Yeah, I think a lot of people miss the root cause because they actually ignore issues like that.
Right, right. And then once you find it, then you give instructions for remediation of the issue. In this case, it would be to create a new virtual network adapter like a VMX-Net 3, and then
so it's of course a lot. So when you don't have VMware tools installed, the first thing is to install the VMware tools, and automatically the adapter type is going to be better and going to be a VMX-Net. The next step is actually when you move forward, going for a VMX-Net 2 or 3 adapter. The best thing is really to basically add a new adapter, make sure that everything is working fine, and then remove the old adapter. To change the type directly, typically you end up with a new MAC address. So you need to be a bit careful. Is it okay to have a new MAC address or not? Then you need to change the adapter type directly, or you need to add a network adapter and remove the old one. That is a bit question of network of the network team to discuss.
Right, right. And I like how you guys usually recommend not only the steps for remediation, but also in most cases there's like a Power CLI script, and there's even in many cases a video that shows you exactly how to fix it. So that's also
in this case, luckily no Power CLI script.
yeah. And for this issue it would be quite a script, but yeah, for most cases like the VMware tools I know and snapshots and such, there are some remediation scripts. So excellent info here on old virtual machine network devices, something that most admins I think don't think about. Let's move on before we run out of time, and let's move on and talk about number 3, which is virtual machine memory limits. And so, the impact of virtual machine memory limits is that the guest operating system just doesn't get the memory that it needs, and that results in poor application performance. And I think there's a lot of new or junior admins out there that have the misunderstanding that memory limits in some ways are good, and they think that they might assign a 4 gigs to a VM, but give it a limit of 1024 so it doesn't somehow max out the server, or they just don't understand really what the limit does, I think. And so I think a lot of cases they confuse it with a reservation, and they're trying to reserve some memory for the VM, but instead they put on a limit. And another way to accidentally get a limit on is if you move a virtual machine from a resource pool, it can result in a limit being on the VM, even though you might not have expected it or wanted it on there. And so once the VM has this memory limit, it's the guest isn't getting the memory that it needs. That's going to result in swapping and poor performance. It's really like having the VM undersized. So in the case of the graphic there, it's got 4 gigs, but the limit is 1 gig. The limit is really just like the VM having 1 gig essentially. And so Opvizor goes out and it scans the virtual infrastructure, looks for VMs that have memory limits on them, and then makes a recommendation on how to resolve that.
Just one thing to add, because you listed the situation when it can occur. A situation we've found very often is when you use an importing tool, for example, VMware Converter, then it typically also sets a limit.
Yes, great point. Great point, Dennis. Thank you. Yeah, so you want to watch out for memory limits. Memory limits, I've never seen a situation where someone really needed a memory limit. I mean, very, very rarely are they ever very useful at all in a production environment.
Sometimes for a hoster when they want to sell more than they actually have.
Right.
That might, but a real big issue is the guest still sees 4 gig. So in your scenario, the guest still can see the 4 gig and can try to access it. So when you actually set the limit to 1 gigabyte, like in this example, you end up with 3 gigabyte basically not being accessible by the virtual machine and the application within the virtual machine. It's just a big headache for the application. You have swapping, ballooning, and your application is just going crazy.
Right. Yeah, memory limits are a bad thing. Moving on to number 4, virtual machine snapshot age and size. This is one that I wanted to talk about because I presented at VMworld a myth-busting session, we called it, in the virtual environment, and snapshot performance was something that we tested at that time. And a lot of people think that snapshots don't really have any performance impact. They just seem like sort of magical pictures of virtual machines in time, but they actually can have a negative performance impact on virtual machines, a virtual machine's I/O performance, especially if that virtual machine does a lot of I/O changes to its virtual disk, and especially if you let the snapshot sit out there, for a long time. So the longer the snapshot sits and the more disk I/O changes you have to the virtual disk, the greater the performance impact will be on that virtual machine's virtual disk. And if you have a bunch of virtual machines on the same LUN, like back in vSphere 4, there was LUN locking, where when the snapshot took place, the whole LUN with all the virtual machines on it was locked for that period of time that it took to take the snapshot, which was very bad for all those virtual machines. Now with VAAI, if you implement it in vSphere 5, and above, if you implement it with your storage array, then that LUN locking problem is essentially gone away. But you still can have a negative performance impact from snapshots that have been sitting out there a long time and on virtual machines that do a lot of I/O changes. With snapshots, with backup applications also, there's many cases where they use snapshots to do the backup through VADP, and then somehow, maybe there's a backup failure and the snapshots get out of sync out there. So you have these snapshots that aren't visible in vCenter, but they're visible. They're actually out there, on the disk, and they can grow and grow and grow over time, and you don't actually see them through vCenter. There are a lot of cases of that, being reported. So a tool like Opvizor would go out there and scan for virtual machines with large snapshots and snapshots that have been out there for a long time, and make recommendations on how to remediate those. Is that right, Dennis?
Yeah, actually, we are, of course, going for large old snapshots, but we also watch out for a big number of snapshots. And if the snapshot manager, for example, is not aware of existing snapshots anymore, so what we call invalid or broken snapshot. So this can, for example, occurs very often when you have backup products with change block tracking active, and for example, a host goes down or some other locking mechanism is not working correctly, so the CTK file is locked, and you cannot basically remove the real snapshot, but the snapshot is removed from the snapshot manager. So we found situations where snapshots are as old as 2 years, large as several terabytes, and the best thing we ever had was a 4 terabyte in total size snapshots, so several snapshots that were broken. So the customer was not aware of the snapshot at all. But when you imagine if this is going to fail and combine a very old snapshot or a big snapshot with a thin provisioned data store, and the data store is going to be out of data or out of space, you basically sign off all virtual machines instantly when the limit of the data store has been reached.
Right. Yeah, you could end up with all VMs and all applications going down that are on that LUN, or if it's in NFS, all VMs really. And the 4 terabyte snapshot that you talked about, I mean, 4 terabytes of storage on a enterprise grade SAN, I mean, saving that amount of space is very significant, and it equates to real dollars. So it's really impressive what you guys can do by continually monitoring the environment, and you're not just going to vCenter. You're actually smarter than vCenter because you're looking at the real files on the disk to see if there are snapshots there, not just believing whatever vCenter tells you.
Exactly. So we also find out, for example, the size of the snapshots. So even if your snapshots are not visible in the snapshot manager anymore, we really look up the data store, what amount of disk space is actually used.
Very nice. Very nice. So moving on to number 5, our last of the top 5 most common virtual machine issues, and that is misconfigurations of virtual machine logging. You want to talk about that, Dennis?
Yeah, because there is actually directly a very funny story that it's covering, or basically the cause was the virtual machine logging. Virtual machine logging basically means the virtual machine is continuously writing a log file. When you change to debug mode, for example, you end up with a lot of data that is written into the log file called vmware.log, or then it's doing a log rotate. Unfortunately, when you have older vSphere versions, so older than 5.1, the log rotating only happens when you actually shut down the virtual machine and you when you power it on again. So really you need to shut it down. You cannot just do a reboot. You really need to restart or to shut it down, power it off. And then it could endless grow. So the first time we ran into this situation was with our own data crawler. So the crawling agent was installed at the customer environment, and the customer came back that crawling the data takes so long, we have a bug. So we looked it up and we found out, because we are actually looking into the VMware log files, and we found out that he had a log file of several hundred megabytes in size. So the virtual machine was basically running forever. The log file was huge. And when you think of that, the log file is basically occupying a lot of, or wasting. It's really wasting your space. And you have a lot of issues when it comes to moving the virtual machine, copying the virtual machine, stuff like that. As soon as the last VMware log file is taken, you're actually wasting bandwidth, you're wasting storage space. And in our case, actually, the agent couldn't just do, or could do nothing, just copy data. So we ended up in basically looking for the size first and then cutting the VMware log file from being crawled at all. But what we also directly found out is nearly nobody is limiting the rotate size. That means the virtual machine is really only rotating the log file when it's powered off and powered on again. And it's so easy to change. So we provide, for example, then a PowerCLI script that you can directly change it. And typically you have an environment with different versions of VMware, some older, some 5.0, some 5.1, some 5.5. So we basically recommend having the log size and keep old setting always being configured. Some of the newer VMware systems, so 5.5 for example, don't care about the rotate size anymore. They're rotating it automatically. That's a really good step. But like mentioned in the beginning, we actually wanted to point to some issues we detect very often in environments, and this is one of the definitely top issues we encounter. And a lot of people, like I said, have a vCenter 5.5, but in this case, it's ESX host that actually needs to be looked at.
Yeah, Dennis, this is actually a fairly confusing topic when I went and read the VMware knowledge base articles, because, as you said, there's so many different versions of ESX, and there's so many different log file configurations. You know, they're just text file configurations, and they apply differently to different versions. And so I'm sure, you know, a lot of admins, just as I was when I read the knowledge base article, even if you try to educate yourself on it, it's a confusing topic. And
Absolutely.
yeah, and it's also, as you said, it, you know, has the potential to cause, you know, an application outage if it were to fill up your storage, or potentially could be a malicious attack, you know, a source of malicious attack, I suppose. So with Opvizor, you all make recommendations on um, the log file changes, and what else? Are there PowerCLI scripts, or?
You typically solve that pretty easy with a PowerCLI script, yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, I'm excited to see what you can show us in the Opvizor demonstration here in just a few minutes. Dennis, let me go ahead and change the presenter role over to you and give you keyboard and mouse control, so that you can show us exactly firsthand what Opvizor can do.
Sure. So actually, just to give you also an idea how actually to use Opvizor, and we recently published and released the free health check, so you can also check your environment with up to one cluster. So basically the first cluster in your VMware environment you can check for free to get issue descriptions, issue findings, and reports. But of course, we also offer a commercial edition. You can check up the editions, and basically to start with Opvizor, you just register here. You start with a free edition. you contact us and we grant you an enterprise license if you want to see the full functionality. But typically you are up and running in a couple of minutes because it's just one Windows service you need to install, and basically that's it. I already configured it and I already uploaded a test environment. It's our small demo environment. So I tuned it a bit to show actually the top issues we just spoke about and give you an idea of what we actually detect. And afterwards, so after our webinar and when we release some new white paper David is going to announce soon, I'm also going to update the descriptions here with the download link. And that is something that is really cool about Opvizor, because all the descriptions you see here, we can easily update. So we can update it within a couple of minutes, and you directly get informed, you directly see the changes. That means all the latest information we get from VMware knowledge bases, from customers, from partners, from the community, we can easily add into the descriptions of the issues, but you can also comment it. Private comments are basically meant for your system and administrators internally, so your internal team. Public comments are meant for really the public then, so everybody that is using Opvizor can actually see that. And like discussed in the beginning, of course, the VMware tool is outdated. We directly find. We also directly detect if the tools are then updated. Then we automatically close the issue, so you don't need to manually close it. And you automatically see that the issue has been solved. So you get notified, everything is solved, so you can track it, you can document it. Another thing we spoke about was memory limit. And actually the memory limit we have in two flavors if you want to. The memory limit is just the configuration itself. So typically for systems that are powered off or systems that don't have any negative performance impact yet, but you see here the description. So we describe about the issue itself. We describe or give you recommendations and resolutions. In this case, how you can remediate the issue in your environment with the Power CLI. And you can also watch a video where we actually explain the way how to remediate, the way how to detect, and of course, the root cause of the memory limitation issue when we raise it. So you see it here, basically when you have a system configured with less, well, a limit set less than the configured memory, we automatically raise an issue. You can tweak this difference, and you can, of course, also send automatic alerts. So you can right-click here and you can enable alerting. So next time a system pops up, you automatically get an information about it, and you automatically get an information on how to solve this specific issue. In this case, it's already causing a performance issue. So you have the limit set, but additionally, you see there's the performance already decreased. Ballooning and swapping is happening. So in this case, you should act a lot faster. Just to go through the top issues and that you get an idea about. So this is a limitation of so basically the log limitation. Also here, you always get a description, you get the information where it comes from, you get a recommendation about what values to set. In this case, we provide you Power CLI script to change it. We provide you further information. That's a very important thing to our customers. Not only telling you what we have found, how to solve it, we also give you an idea where this information comes from. I mean, especially when it comes to security settings or when it comes to specific configuration changes, you typically want to know the source of the information and where you can actually read more about it, or just to have a pretty good foundation and pretty good reasons why you're actually going to change it. And of course, also our funny old network device. So also here we automatically detect if the virtual machine is using an old device. We also detect about if the virtual machine is running or not. We detect if the virtual machine is causing performance issues. So then we raise additional issues you can actually directly see and you can also alert on. Regarding the snapshots, we already spoke about snapshot age. So of course, we are looking for snapshots that are older than a specific amount of days. You can also configure that. And here's the bad snapshot inconsistence. That it really means that's basically the worst situation you can run into with snapshots, and it automatically happens. So what basically happens whenever you are going to remove or delete a snapshot, and this is done typically by the backup product who creates also the snapshot. First, the snapshot manager entry is going to be deleted. Afterwards, VMware is trying to basically delete the snapshot files, the data files itself. If something goes wrong with it, VMware just stops this process. All the data remains, but it's not going to recover the snapshot manager entry. So you end up with a snapshot that is still existent, that is still getting used by the virtual machine. It's still growing, and you don't have a clue about it. When a new snapshot is created, you can end up in a situation that is really a snapshot, deletion fails, snapshot, deletion fails. So you end up with several dozens of snapshots and you are not aware of. Actually, we had a situation, but this is a long time ago, and with an older vCenter, that actually there were so many snapshots on a virtual machine because of this snapshot inconsistency or broken snapshots that vCenter stops or stopped working when reading the data of the virtual machine. So basically, when restarting the vCenter, after 2 minutes or 3 minutes, vCenter went down. And you couldn't do anything. And the best thing on that is, of course, when vCenter is down, you have no clue what virtual machine was last. So in the log file of vCenter, just the manage object reference number was mentioned and not the virtual machine name. So the easiest thing in this case was then to write a script and run through all data stores if there are snapshots. But you can imagine to get the idea to search for snapshots took a couple of hours. Also, what we provide are reports. So you can create reports based on the data store usage, based on the snapshots, the wasted virtual machine resources, and you can configure Opvizor to send you automatically emails. So several on every Monday, for example, you want to receive HTML email regarding your wasted VM resources. That can also be configured here. And the last thing I want to show you is Application Optimizer. You can actually select a virtual machine and you can overlay the configuration and check it against, for example, Oracle Database. The Oracle Database profile can also be used for Microsoft SQL systems. And what you get back is a report about the system and what checks has been made and what checks, for example, the system failed. So you have a pretty good idea how you can optimize the system later on So taking all these information into account that Opvizor gives you, you can really make sure that your whole foundation is in the best shape that it can possibly be with the investment you took to buy hardware to actually set up your storage system, your networks, and so on, to make sure actually that you get most of it out of your environment, but also find all these obvious, but of course within these 700 issues we detect also some more complex issues you can detect, and of course we are always happy to provide you solutions, but I can also just engage you to contribute to Opvizor. So whenever you encounter situations when you open up a VMware support ticket, please let us know. We can actually put it into the product.
Yeah, and Dennis, one of the things that really struck me when you did the demonstration there is the immediate ability of the application to react to feedback from the public. So if some new security issue pops up, or there's some patch that causes some issue, you all could create a rule, and the public can comment on it if there's some way to fix it that's better than the knowledge base article. If there's some blog post, you all can put that in the description there. And so you all are really sort of becoming the unbiased resource of immediate problem solving, if you will, I guess, for virtualization environments.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I mean, and that's to me unique because other tools that are installed as local applications, they're only going to get updated every quarter, or twice a year or something like that from the vendor. So they're not going to be able to react that fast, and they're also going to only provide their official, let's say, information, like the official VMware knowledge base article. If there's a better resource out on the internet that someone has created or come up with a better solution, they're not going to use that because that's not from the official vendor. Whereas you guys are bringing together the community to help one another. So I like that. I like that part of it. But
Thank you.
yeah. So excellent demo, Dennis. I guess with that, let's go back to our slides here, and we have got a Q&A sessions planned. We've got a prize drawing, and we've got a few questions here for the audience. So let's start off with the audience poll. I've got 4 quick questions for the audience here. The first one is, how many hosts do you have in your environment today? And I really appreciate everyone answering these questions to help us, get to know our audience and ensure that, this webinar and future webinars, best suit your needs. So I'll give you just a few seconds to answer that, and then we'll move on. We've got a lot of good questions coming in from the audience as well, technical questions about virtual machine problems. So we'll be getting to those here in just a second. All right, most of the audience has voted. Let me go ahead and close that poll, and I'll move on to the next question here. And the question is, do you have any plans to move your virtual environment to Hyper-V? Hyper-V, I think, is hyped a lot out there, about, virtual VMware admins moving en masse to Hyper-V. A lot of people are, I don't know who it is who's hyping that, but for the most part, I haven't seen that. So we're always curious to hear what's the status about that from real virtual machine admins. So let me share the results with you. As you can see, 75% of the audience says no, and 20% says yes, some of my workload. They'll be considering moving 20% of your workload, and 5% does say yes. So good information. Thank you for answering that. Third question here is, what about moving to a multi-hypervisor environment? Do you have plans to do multi-hypervisor? Are you moving completely to Hyper-V, or are you planning to do have 2 hypervisors running in the data center? So we've got most of the audience answering that. I appreciate that. Let me close the results here and share those. 75% says they're planning to stick with vSphere. 25% says they do have plans to do multi-hypervisor. So, and then one last quick question here, and that is, do you currently use any of these virtualization management vendors? Just to see what tools you might be using today, if any. So, and then in the meantime, if you've answered those questions, feel free to post a question in the Q&A box. If you have a question about your top virtual machine problem, or other VM problems that came to mind here today while watching the webinar. So let me go ahead and close those poll results. And with that, let's go ahead and move into our question and answer time. But the question is, what performance data should be analyzed when troubleshooting virtual machine issues? Dennis, I guess I'll go ahead and give you first shot at answering questions. What do you look for when looking for VM issues?
The first thing I typically go, I go for any performance-related issues, and so CPU ready values, of course, CPU waiting cycles, but via memory issues, what you need to know is what is the level of ballooning, what is the level of swapping, is there swapping at all, ballooning at all. I'm looking for the host, especially when it comes to NUMA. For example, the CPU sockets versus NUMA nodes, is typically the first things I'm going for when looking at performance data for memory issues. That is actually also what Opvizor, of course, does. So we try to replicate also a lot of the typical troubleshooting things. But there's also a very good blog post out there. So when you Google for ESX top and yellow bricks, you find one of the best performance troubleshooting guides with ESX top, and that is typically when you really go deep dive, ESX top is pretty handy.
Yeah, ESX Top is a great tool, in my opinion, to learn how to use. If nothing else, just to use it to understand the resources, that come into play in managing performance. Even if you don't use it forever, every day as your main, troubleshooting and monitoring tool, it's a great tool just to be able to educate yourself on the resources that are working together to make the virtual environment work. Let's see, a number of questions out there about how Opvizor is deployed in a virtual environment, Dennis?
So typically it's a Windows system within the network that has access to the vCenter or several vCenter systems. So when we don't have a vCenter number limit. So you can basically install it on any Windows desktop or server system. It can be a virtual machine, it can be physical, it could even be on a vCenter itself. I don't recommend it for larger environments with 10 hosts and more, but it's possible. And we're currently working on a virtual appliance. So the virtual appliance will potentially be ready in about 2 months.
Okay, great. How is Opvizor licensed? At the host level or per VM or?
It's licensed on a host level. So basically all hosts within a vCenter or that are managed by a vCenter needs to be licensed, and it's licensed on a yearly license, typically enterprise license. And we have several options also when it comes to multi-years and when it comes to specific storage systems. So the best is always to contact sales@opvizor.com to get a better understanding about prices. And very often we have some nice promotions.
Okay, and the great thing I love about software as a service products is the ease of testing. Try it out, see if you like it, and see what it does for you. You'll very quickly know if it's helpful, or not by simply trying it out. Let's see. I know, Dennis, we're running short on time here. Looks like we're actually over our time. So, are there any further questions you want to answer, or should we move into our prize drawing?
I just saw another question that is actually the integration possibilities. So we can actually integrate with different protocols, email, SNMP, but we also have an API where you can even connect with PowerShell against it. So we have plenty of integration possibilities for monitoring tools and help desk tools, for example.
Okay. Okay, excellent. Well, I want to respect everyone's time on the webinar and not keep you past our scheduled time. So with that, let's go ahead and move into our prize drawing of the fabulous Microsoft Band. And based on the registration list for this webinar, we've selected a winner at random, and the winner is Michael A. And he is an engineer from California. So we'll be contacting you, Michael, via email to get the shipping information for your prize. So congratulations, and I really appreciate everyone who attended the webinar today and joined us to learn about virtual machine issues. Before you go, we do have a couple resources we'll be emailing out to you after the webinar. The first one is the white paper that shares the same name as this webinar, solving the 5 most common VMware virtual machine issues that I created with advice from Scott and Dennis as well. And so we'll be contacting you with that, and it goes into the topics we've discussed in the webinar today in greater detail with some more links and solutions. So I hope you look for that email. We also have another white paper that you might want to check out, and it is about the requirements for your next virtual machine monitoring tool. It's a checklist, and that white paper is on the opvizor.com website as well. Correct, Dennis?
Yes.
Excellent. And with that, we've reached the end of the webinar. I really appreciate everyone joining us today. And I hope that you'll check out our sponsor, opvizor.com. And we will be sending out a link to the recording as well as a link to that white paper. And thanks, Scott. And thanks, Dennis, for joining us.
Thank you, David.
Yeah, thank you. And of course, thanks to the audience.
Yeah, thanks, everyone, and have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Take care. Bye.